From Beyond Marketing, it's the 20-Minute Call, a podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, check out the 20-Minute Call hosted by me, James LeBarry. My guest today is admired throughout the skydiving world, not just because of what she's accomplished, but because of how she treats people. Eliana Rodriguez is one of the kindest people you'll ever meet in the sport. She is humble and will never tout her accomplishments, which include being a 3-time world champion, 21-time national champion, has participated in 10 world records, and was inducted into the International Skydiving Hall of Fame in 2022. In her 28-year career, she's made over 16,000 jumps. I'm thrilled to welcome Eliana Rodriguez to the 20-Minute Call. Welcome, Eliana.
Hi, thank you.
You're smiling. You almost seem like a little uncomfortable by what I just read.
Oh, it's just interesting to hear all that, like all said at once.
I know that there's probably some things in the midst of all that is not even included. That's just a high-level summary.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Eliana, let's dive in. Part of my desire for this podcast is to get to know my guests a little bit more beyond the jumpsuit. And when I try to understand a person, it's always nice to know where they come from. Would you tell me a little bit about your parents?
Okay, yeah. So my parents are from Colombia, South America, and they moved out here in the early 70s, and they actually met in the U.S., in New York, and I was born in New Jersey. But yeah, they were hardworking people. My dad worked a lot in factories. He used to build airplane parts. He was a machinist, and then he worked in other industries as a machinist as well. So that's what he was doing most of his life. And my mom also worked in whatever she could work in, like whether it was factories or when we were in Florida, and it's a big on tourism. She worked in hotels and she was a cleaning lady in the hotel. So it was a lot of hard work. But she was also always on the side, had a little business, like either trying to sell some, Avon or like cleaning products or perfume. So she was always trying to do a little side hustle and always trying to give us a better life. So I am so grateful for them, because they worked really hard and they were very loving parents. So I got very lucky in having them as my parents.
When I've been researching your story, I get the sense that you have come from humble beginnings, when you were, working or before leaving the military to try and get your jump ratings. Money was an issue. But I never get the sense in reading about you that you ever felt that you were poor.
No, I never felt that way. I mean, I was the only child, so they were always very, trying to spoil me in whatever way they could. And my dad was always, I had an adventurous spirit when I was younger. So he was always trying to expose me, things like trying to take me to some ski lessons, but not a ton, here, a little bit here and there, of course, swimming lessons and taking me to the amusement park, to the roller coaster rides. So he was trying to get me to I had all this energy of, I liked things that scared me a little bit. So he was concerned I would do something that would, I might hurt myself. So he was trying to take me to the parks, put me on the roller coaster rides that I loved. And, just so that, get that energy out,
It's interesting though. He was the one that mentioned to you when you were 14,
Yes.
we should go skydiving. Most dads wouldn't really sort of encourage that, especially for their daughters at 14. It sounds like your dad had a real sense of adventure.
He did. I mean, I just think about both of them moving out to another country, not speaking the language, and not having a ton of money, and just that in itself back then, especially when you didn't have the internet to look things up before you went, like my mom, she showed up in New York in March in like a little skirt and like a little, that realizing that it was really cold in New York in March compared to Colombia. Colombia is always pretty warm. But my dad was the one that he saw an ad in the newspaper, and when I was like 14 or 15, and because he knew I love adventure, he wanted to go skydiving. He wanted to go with me. So yeah, he asked me that. It was just one question. It's like, would you jump out of an airplane? And I was like, ooh, yes, and we soon found out I was too young to jump, because I was, 14 or 15. And then we needed to be 18. So that dream and that desire, that curiosity, I call it a curiosity because it's, I didn't know it was going to be a passion, right? I had never tried it. I just thought it was going to be another roller coaster ride. So that curiosity had to like be put on hold for a little bit, but it stayed there. Like it was something that kind of kept coming around in my mind for the next couple of years until I joined the military.
I mean, is it surreal to your father that little off chance invitation to go skydiving and you were too young? So it was one of those things that it was a goal unchecked. Mm-hmm. Now you're in the Skydiving Hall of Fame. Is it almost like, oh my gosh, could you have even imagined?
Yeah, I mean, and none of us could have, that something that I was doing for fun, just for an adventure would turn into something so big in my life and, and given me so many gifts, and so many other adventures.
Are your parents, in coming to the U.S., were they, like for me growing up in the Caribbean, America was that great big country sort of on the horizon. And if you can figure out your way there, it's the land of opportunity. Did they have that sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That was definitely, coming to find a better life and to help their families, back home, because my mom was like one of 13 and my dad was one of 6, although a lot of his siblings were already in the U.S. So he had some family in the U.S. My mom came with a friend.
Amazing. I would have to say, when I look at my life, I've had the good fortune of chasing my passions that I would only be allowed to dream maybe being here. So it's neat to me as I try to have empathy, thinking about your dad, that you're in America, to be able to say, hey, daughter, do you want to go skydiving? Like, that's probably not something that one gets to say in many places in the world. It's cool.
Yeah. We're very fortunate. I mean, I'm so happy that they've made the decisions that they've made, and I've really benefited from it.
Yeah.
And from my dad too, not being like, he encouraged the adventure, like the adventurous side of me instead of trying to like hold me down, right? So I'm really grateful for that.
A quick break here to address the Drop Zone owners listening to the pod. If you're a DZO, then you know the insanity of taking your passion and making it your business. Why'd you do that? Running a DZ is hard. Between the stressors of liability, 30-day payment terms on fuel after 4 weeks of miserable weather, and angry staff who are convinced they've been skipped in the rotation, you need a tool that helps reduce your stress. Enter Burble Software. All right. Conceived by a DZO who's been in the trenches just like you, Burble is the most sophisticated manifest and booking software on the planet. Your life as a DZO is hard enough, so don't be that DZO who tries to save a few bucks using software that wasn't built for us. Burble, the must-have drop zone management software for the 182DZ to the multi-turbine monster. Burble. When you speak about your childhood, you've described yourself as very, quote, smiley.
Yeah.
I know that's how you are today. Whenever I and others around you, your smile radiates positive energy. Is this positivity natural to your own personality, or is it something ingrained from an influence in how you were raised?
I think a little bit of both. I've always been, like a happy kid. I mean, I had great parents, that I didn't feel poor. They always did their best. And Another part of it too was we did move around a lot. So I was always like new at school, trying to make friends, right? So that might have added to it. But I think even before that, when I was like an infant, like 1 or 2, I was already like a happy baby, you know. And my parents are really like mellow people, like really relaxed people. And yeah, so I think that was easy, you know, to be happy around them. And they were super stoked to have their little girl, you know. I was, you know, daddy's girl for sure.
Well, and what were your early passions? Did you have any specific hobbies or interests that might even give us an inclination of what your future would hold?
No, I mean, we moved around a lot. I was always like trying to fit in, you know, into a new place. But, you know, I didn't do sports in school. And I don't know if it was because of all the moving around, the lack of money, probably as well. My parents probably didn't want to, you know, encourage because they weren't going to be able to like afford it. But also I was going to some private like Catholic schools that I don't even remember a lot of other people doing the sport. So maybe they just didn't have them in those particular schools. I remember just wanting to be everything. You know, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be an astronaut. You know, I wanted to be an actress. You know, so it was like all over the place.
Let's fast forward a little bit. You enlisted in the U.S. Army at age 17.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you decide to join the military as opposed to going to college?
In high school, a lot of my friends and I were looking for like colleges and stuff, and even went to see one. But I started to think, I'm like, I don't even know what I want to do. Like I hadn't decided yet. And my parents didn't have money to send me to school. And I just certainly didn't have money to, you know, saved for school. And so we had to take an ASVAB test in high school. And I didn't even realize that that was what it was for the military. And so after we took the test, they would call you up to the guidance counselor. And there was a recruiter there from the Army. And he said, hey, you did really well on your test. Have you ever considered joining the military? And I hadn't even considered it at that point, although my dad had been in the National Guard for 6 years, and he really liked it. He actually really enjoyed it. And so I hadn't even thought about it. But when he said, you know, you can do 2 years, you're going to get like $17,000 for school, which sounded a lot to me at the time, I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I can go in for 2 years, think about what I want to do, because I still don't know what I want to do, and then I could get some money for school. And then, you know, and he said, even while you're in, you can go to school, and it's, you know, it can either be discounted or free. So I thought, this is perfect. So I went home and told my mom and dad, and my dad was happy. I think they were worried about like, what is she going to do next? Like, you know, and how are we going to pay for school? And so when that opportunity came up, they were like, you know, he was ready to sign. My mom was probably a little more concerned, like, oh man. But yeah, they had to sign for me because I wasn't 18 yet. And, yeah, I joined, and I ended up once I got to, there was what they call the MEP station, where you go and they do the full physical and test on you, and then they connect you to what your job is going to be in the military. You know, I went in there thinking I'm going to sign for a contract for 2 years, and it's weird that I didn't go. Like my dad didn't come with me. I went by myself as a 17-year-old to make these decisions. You know, and. So I thought 2 years, okay, that sounded good, even though to me at 17, 2 years seemed kind of long. But I went in there, and the first thing they're like, okay, what about this job as like, you know, something in an office for 4 years? I was like, ooh, an office? No way. I can't work in an office. And 4 years? No, you know, what about the 2-year jobs? And they're like, a medic for 6 years. And I was like, 6 years? I mean, I'm 17. I'm like, that is a lifetime. And I immediately thought about being in war and like, you know, people severely injured, like losing limbs. And I was like, no way. I don't want to be a medic. And so I'm like, what about the 2-year jobs? And they're like, well, there's only like infantry, which women are not allowed to do, and a cook. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't want to be a cook either. So then I almost walked out. I started getting really nervous. I'm like, yeah, maybe it's not the right time. You know, maybe I can come back later when there's 2-year jobs. And they didn't want to let me leave, right? You know, they wanted to because they knew if I left, I might not come back. So then we negotiated on one that was 4 years for 3 years, which was in communications. And so then I was like, okay, I guess I could do 3 years. And I got a little more money for school. So it would be like $22,000 for school, $22,500 for school. So I signed for a 3-year contract. And then I ended up, after 3 years, I ended up extending for 7 months. So I should have just signed the 4-year contract and got gotten a little bit more and, gotten a different job. My job was just, it was just an okay job, but I actually really enjoyed the experience in the military. I love actually thinking about it now. I enjoyed the training, even basic training when they're yelling at you and all that. And after I got done with the basic training and the training for my job, and then I got put in at Fort Hood, which is a regular duty station, I was kind of underwhelmed. I was like, oh, that's it? Because I thought I was signing up for 3 years of basic training. Not that I knew it, because that's why that seems so long, like 2 or 3 years or 4. I'm like, oh my God, that's too much, but after I got done with all the training, I missed all the training because it was something new every day. You're doing some cool stuff every day. I mean, you're getting yelled a lot too and smoked, like lots of push-ups and things like that, but it's good for you, right? So I actually really enjoyed the training part of it, more than just being at like a regular duty station and, having to go out into the field was, it wasn't as fun.
This is an interesting point because you're tough, Eliana. You don't do or accomplish the things that you've done without a level of toughness. But at the same time, your exterior is quote unquote smiley, right? You do radiate positive energy.
Thank you.
But there's also a toughness within. There has to be. I'm assuming. Like for me, when I think, oh boy, if I was 17 and I enlisted into the Army, and when I think of basic training, I think of everything that you see on TV of just getting yelled at. To me, like, I would be thinking, what have I gotten myself into? And you're saying, oh, actually, it was okay. It was good. It was good for me. It was, the positivity throughout. But obviously, you had to be tough. Did you ever second guess going, why did I do this?
Well, initially, it's definitely like, I don't think I realized that that's how, they were going to be yelling at you. They don't make you feel at home for sure. You get in trouble for everything because you're just learning the rules of like being in the military, like how to wear the uniform, how to address them, and you mess it up all the time. So you're always getting in trouble. So you're like, oh my God. But I think you get like, then you get comfortable with it, right? At first I was like homesick and everything, and I was like crying to my parents. But like you quickly start getting into the routine, getting the hang of it, and laughing about it, because we're all getting smoked, and you end up cracking up about it, But yeah, I think I enjoyed just I like the training. I like the, obviously I like training, right? Like, yeah, I enjoyed, like every day, something new, being challenged, something different, something new, something cool. And I mean, some things were, not always fun, but, it was just, I think it's just the newness of it. Learning. I like learning. I enjoy learning.
One thing is you were insistent upon when you were in the military is that you wanted to get the opportunity to jump.
Yeah.
And you were insistent about that. And I was curious why you would be insistent about this when you had never jumped before. Why did you think that this was for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that idea kept going around, and that was one of the first questions I asked my recruiter. I'm like, hey, am I going to get to go jump? Even before I went to the MEP station, and he was like, yeah, just when you get done with all your training and you get to your first duty station, just request it. So I thought, okay, I just believe them. And I think you could have requested, but because I wasn't sent to airborne units at the beginning, like my first 2 duty stations were not airborne units, they didn't really need to spend their budget on me going to airborne school. So I got denied. And then I did get sent to Fort Bragg, which is home of the airborne. And I was like, yes, I'm finally going to get to do this. And I got sent to an airborne unit and I requested it and they said yes. And then so I was super happy. I was like, oh, I'm finally going to get to do this. And I was just, I just wanted to jump. I don't think, like back then you didn't look online to see like where the jump places were. And, so it was just like a way to do it. And I didn't know the difference between being airborne and just being like a skydiver, like with the, the free fall and the round parachutes. And they actually looked for a school date for me to go. And they realized by the time I got out of school, I was not going to have more. Had less than a year left, so they denied me again, and I was like, "Oh man!" But at one point, they even took me because everybody knew I wanted to do it. They even took me on one of their jumps, and I got to be in the plane and watch everybody go jump, which was cool. And some of the guys in the unit were like, there's a skydiving center nearby in Rayford, and you can just rent a parachute and jump. And I thought like back then, I just thought it was that easy. So I was like, okay, so they were supposed to go with me. They were like, well, yeah, we can all go together. We'll go jump. And then, a month goes by. Oh, we don't have any money. Or we don't have any time. Another month goes by. And, so finally I'm like, I'm just going to go. And I went.
Incredible. And during that time, I'm going to fast forward through a little bit of time here, but you start doing static line. And then when you get into the free fall aspect of your training, you really struggled. And I tell that story a lot, or have told, when I was running a drop zone to students that were struggling. Mm-hmm. And so let me tell you about this lady, Eliana Rodriguez. The struggles that you're having, this world champion started where you did. I have always been somewhat tickled that it didn't necessarily come completely naturally to you.
Yeah. I did the static line jumps, and that part went okay because you're like hanging on the strut. You just let go, and you're already presented. And so I was running out of time in the military, right? I was about to get out. My instructor suggested that I switch over to AFF because I'd done 5 static line jumps. Then I did a hop and pop where I pulled for myself. Then I did a 5-second delay, and then I was on to the 10-second delays. And I'm like, this is going to take forever to get to like the 45, 50, 50-second delays. And so I'm like, I'm going to be out of the military. And being in the military, I was going through the course with the 80-second free fall activity, which was a military club. So I got really good discounts, as being a soldier, which was, I needed it at the time, otherwise it would have been really hard to do. So they suggested I switch over to AFF, but they were going to start me on level 5 since I was already pulling for myself, right? So I go out on that first jump with an instructor. Before I was just like holding on by myself and letting go. And anytime they would say, okay, you can go, I would just take a deep breath and then I would let go. And so this time he told me to give the count. And I was like, okay. So I was like, ready, set, go. And then I was going to take a deep breath and go. And when he heard go, like he just like ripped me off the plane, of course, right? I didn't go on go. And that started to jump all crazy, like, oh my God, like overwhelming. And, I followed his hand signals. I was able to pass that first one, but I was like, whoa, that was like completely different experience because the other ones I only had like a little tiny bit of free fall. I was already presented, with being on the strut. And so then we did level 6, and on level 6, I was like spinning. I flipped over on my back. I saw my shoes. I was like, whoa, that's a weird picture, like seeing my feet in front of me. And they had to flip me over. And so I didn't pass that one. And then I did, I was like, I started to, and then I did another one, but it was still like, challenging. And then I did like a level 7, and they told me to pull, and I started to track thinking, I still need to track because that was part of the plan. So I started to go, and they like had to stop and pull for me. I was like, I was at one point, I was like, man, I don't know if I'm good at this. I don't know if this sport's for me. I was like, it just felt like out of control. Like I didn't feel like I was doing good. It was scary. And fortunately, my instructors took the extra effort because at the time, there wasn't any civilian wind tunnels, but they managed to get me into the military wind tunnel that they had there at Fort Bragg. And they got me in there in a nice suit. And I think, I don't even know how much time because back then they didn't keep track of time, but I think it was probably like 10 or 15 minutes. And they fixed my body position, and then I was able to get back to AFF, and then I was much better just with those 10 or 15 minutes. It was a big improvement. And so I did another level 7 jumps, and then I got out of the military, so I left and I went to Florida right after that.
You went to Florida after that, not realizing that time in the tunnel really maybe accelerated your skills beyond what you even knew. You were given some attention when you got to Titusville of like, wow,
yeah,
she's got skills.
at a different time, after my instructors took me in there, I went back to just watch people fly because it was I could walk to the wind tunnel from where my barracks were, and it was just cool to go watch other people fly. And while I was watching, I got invited in, and so they put me in those yellow military suits with the zippers, the Cordura ones, and I got to fly more. So there, at that point, I actually got to fly quite a bit more, where I got to the point where I could do like side slides. I was doing verticals. I was turning, like staying in the column of air, because that column of air, it wasn't wall to wall, right? You could fall out of the column. And so I was able to stay in that column and, fly. I developed a bad arm position just because I didn't have any weight on, and I had like this big baggy suit, and they didn't adjust the air for me. So my arms were really far back. My feet were on my butt just to like stay down, because it was kind of scary to start to move up because you would fall out. But I was very solid. Like I could stay there, and I could even do a little side slides and turns and verticals. So by the time I got to Florida with my few jumps, and at first I was doing some solos, but when I finally did a two-way, they were like, "Wow, you're doing really good, but you got to fix your arms a little bit. Get your legs out a little bit, fix your arms." And I was like, "Okay, And so so I was getting a lot of a lot of people were like, "Wow, you're doing really good." So that gave me a lot of confidence.
This is the mid-90s. Have you ever reflected going, wow, it's, usually the story of today's champions with your kind of resume go on to become, a member of the Golden Knights. And here you are in that place where these guys are training. Has there ever been a moment like, wow, how crazy is this life that I would go on to beat the Golden Knights as a civilian?
Yeah.
Kind of wild.
Well, I have a funny story around that. When I did go back to the tunnel and I was flying, there was a Golden Knight there who was going through some training, some what they call BNOC training, leadership training, and he wasn't training with his team at the time. So on his time off, he'd go to the tunnel and fly just to to stay current and stuff. So he said, this is John Hoover. He was like, and I talked to him a little bit, and he knew I was getting out. And he goes, when I re-enlisted, they gave me a bonus, and then I used that bonus to get coaching, and then I tried out for the Golden Knights. He goes, you should do that. I had like 10 jumps or something at the time, and I was like, yeah, right. Like I'm gonna get on the Golden Knights. Like I'm still just like trying to be stable, I didn't think that was like it could be possible. And then it's funny, later on, I actually competed against him, and then we beat him specifically. Yeah.
Was there an intersection of at least physical presence of your future peace partner and future husband? Was Craig Girard at the Golden Knights around that time?
No. He was already off the team and in Arizona. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That would have been too much synergy there. Let's fast forward a moment to like a pivotal, I reference crossroads moments, and I assume this is one. You go to Florida, you quickly knock out roughly 200 jumps at Titusville. Mm-hmm. A friend of yours is saying, hey, you really ought to apply for working at the wind tunnel in Orlando, which for those listening, and if you're a newer jumper, you may not realize that back in the mid to late 90s, there was only one tunnel, and that was SkyVenture Orlando, which would later become what we know today as iFly. They're like, hey, your friend is like, you should apply for this. Like, yeah, I don't know. Not really taking it too seriously because you felt like you needed to have 1,000 jumps versus 200. Long story short, you're at, I think it was Skydive City. Person that would be hiring happens to be there, and it's suddenly like, wow, this looks like an actual opportunity. They're saying I should put my application in. You do, you get hired, you become a tunnel instructor. Mm-hmm. Where is your life today, potentially, if you don't say yes to that?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think, really incredible because it changed everything for me. Because at the time, I could only do like maybe 2 days a month, maybe at times 3 or 4. But so let's say I was doing like 10 jumps a month, maybe a little bit more, because that's all I could afford. I mean, I was going to, when I got out of the military, I went to college full time, and I was waiting on tables. So you can imagine, I would go when I had money and time, and I didn't have much of either one of those. And so I was getting very little. I mean, I was getting like 10, let's say 10 or 15 jumps a month. I think I was like my first couple of years, I was doing 100 jumps per year. And so, that progress was going to, take way longer without the tunnel. And so her saying that to me and believing in me and thinking that I could do it, like, I thought it was really interesting because I certainly wouldn't have gone for it. I would have been like, I mean, when she mentioned it, I was like, oh no, my immediate reaction was like, no way. I mean, you need to have probably 1,000 jumps. I don't know where I got that from, but like, that's what I thought, 1,000 jumps. You probably already have to be an AFF instructor and, have all this experience. And, there's no way they would hire me, like why, And so it was kind of an interesting thing because we were never in Zephyr Hills, but there was fires along the East Coast at that time. And she had a friend who was already working there. His name was Troy Keyes, and he was from DeLand, from actually Shannon's team, Shannon Pilcher's team, Genesis. He was their video guy, and he had been hired at the tunnel, but the tunnel wasn't open yet. They're still under construction, and he happened to be in Zephyr Hills. I happened to be in Zephyr Hills because of these fires, and then the general manager of the tunnel was a jumper at Zephyr Hills. And so when she introduced me to Troy, he said, "Oh, the general manager's here. Let me introduce you to him." So it was just like it's a serendipity, right? It's like meant to be. And then I felt like I needed to, I had already told her that I might, but I was not really thinking I would, because I was like, they're not going to take me. Then I felt like, okay, once I got introduced, I'm like, okay, I need to go apply. I'll do I did my resume that whole night, trying to figure out what to put on this resume. And I thought, well, they probably won't hire me, but maybe I'll get a little tunnel time in the tryout, and that would be really cool, So I went over there and I got hired, to my surprise. And it was the best thing because, once you get in there, I was flying every day. I was progressing very quickly, but not only that, I was watching, there was a lot of coaches that were coming from all over the world, the top coaches, top teams, everybody training there. I was seeing people coach every day. So I was watching them, and then anything I was learning from watching, I was trying myself, right? Amongst instructors, we were all practicing. And I think just that's one of the things, being around what you love, around, people that you admire, you're inspired by, that you're learning from. They see you, you see them, right? And then just things start to happen, opportunities start to come out of that. So, I think if you love something, if you, be around it, in any way you can, and, you'll learn so much, you'll be inspired even more. And then, you never know what might come out of it, who you meet and who sees you. Because one of the things is people were seeing things in me that I wasn't, I didn't see in myself. So luckily they did.
I think in our maturity, for myself, if I had as much self-belief in myself as much as my peer group has in me, maybe I would. I was sort of a late bloomer. It took me a while to think that I had any value to offer the world. Was there a point where you recognized, no, I'm as good as they say that I am?
I think that's, for me, I always feel like there's more to learn, even now, I feel like, in every way, in coaching and, in certain positions within the team or in organizing, I always feel like, but I do recognize, over time, the experience I've gained, and, I'm happy to share the knowledge. But yeah, I'm the type of person that needed more of that, I'm so glad people believed in me. And now one of the things I think about is you almost have to start before you're ready, because if you wait till you're ready, you're going to be waiting a long time, because you always feel like you need more, you need to be better.
If you're a fan of the 20-Minute Call, I'd like to invite you to be a member of a budding community with me on Patreon. By becoming a patron of the show, you can join me behind the scenes to discuss options for future guests and gain access to some show swag. It's pretty sweet. Details on how to become a patron can be found in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. We first met when I used to run Skydive Carolina, and eventually I would leave Skydive Carolina to start my business. I've often said that if I knew everything that I needed to know to start a business, then I probably never would have got started.
True.
For me, a little bit of naivete served me well. Mm-hmm. So if I knew everything, I probably wouldn't have begun the journey. The tunnel opens. You join it. Your very first ever team, I believe, was Illusions. Mm-hmm. And then roughly 50 training jumps in. Your mom gets sick. Mm-hmm. And you were 24. And she passed very quickly after that diagnosis. And then shortly after your mom's passing, your dad gets diagnosed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Eliana, that must have been such a dark time.
Yeah, that was definitely, it was difficult. Yeah. But, I mean, for one, I'm grateful that I was able to be there for my mom, and I wasn't like in the military, maybe not being able to get away as much as I did. Because when she started to get sick, I didn't have a plan around it, but I just started, like, I knew she just needed me that day. So then suddenly I'm like, okay, I can't go to work today. And then I'm like, okay, then I got to drop school, like college. I was going to college. I started dropping classes. And of course I had to tell the team immediately, I can't do the team anymore. And so then I got that time with her in the last few months that she had. I'm really grateful for that. And I'm grateful she didn't suffer for a long, long time. But I was 24 and I have me and my brother are 11 years apart and he was 13. And then, 8 months later, my dad gets cancer. So that was scary because I thought, oh my God, we're about to go through this all over again. Unfortunately, he had surgery and then chemo and he was able to recover. But yeah, that was kind of we didn't expect that, she was sick a little bit a few months before, but I just thought she just had like a cold or something like that. I didn't realize it was going to be so serious.
You had examples before of being very strong, right? I go to basic training. Yeah, you see the bright side of it. As you reflect on your mom's passing, you still use the words gratitude. Was there a support system or what got you through the time? Because it's like life was looking up, right? Everything is trending. I'm in the tunnel. I'm around all these people. I'm feeling so inspired. I've found something that I really love. I'm going after it. And then like the worst thing, what is your takeaway from that experience?
At the time because her situation was so serious, I didn't even have time to think about, I can't compete anymore or like that. Like it was like right away, my attention fully went to her. But, I do feel grateful that I was able to just focus on her. Like I still lived with my parents at the time, my credit card bills went up a little bit, but my dad was still going to work and paying for, for things. And I was able to recover from that. And maybe it was my 24, at my age, 24 that I wasn't thinking about anything else. I'm just grateful that I had that time, right? Like that I could just take that time. And then after everything was done, I was able to go back. And again, I wasn't even thinking it through at the time, but thinking back now, it was totally the right thing to do, obviously, to just put everything on hold. I could go back to everything else, but I wouldn't be able to go back to that, spending that special time with her.
You end up coming back to SkyVenture. You end up, and this is going to be more of a comment than a question because there's so much to cover in your career. You come back, you join a team called Rage. You win the U.S. Nationals Intermediate. And I found it interesting that two of your teammates, one is Kyle Stark, who, if I'm not mistaken, went on to do big things with Mandarin. If it's the same Kyle Stark, with VFS, the early days of VFS. And then Thomas Hughes, who would go on, to have a fabulous FS career, including with Airspeed.
Yes.
And you all won that when Thomas Hughes had 200 jumps. Like it's kind of crazy how sort of full circle everyone came from Rage.
Yeah. I think it was just that time in the tunnel. Like it was just like, it was so amazing and new. And we were getting so many influences from all the coaches coming in. And it was incredible. And like, we had no idea that this little team, would be like start, it was the beginning of so much more. Yeah, it was interesting that before that team, a lot of people still weren't sure if the tunnel could help you in free fall. Like they were like, it's not, they were like, a lot of people felt like it wasn't the same. And then after that, they were like, wow, the intermediate team just did a 22 on a jump. They're like, oh my God. And so, then we won by quite a bit of points. So they were like, I think it really like made people realize that you could train in the tunnel and it is going to go up to the sky, it's going to benefit you in the air in the competition.
This year, the inventor of that wind tunnel, a gentleman named Bill Kitchen, was inducted into the International Skydiving Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. Do you remember Bill from that early time?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because I started at the tunnel before it was even open. So it was July of 1998 is when they opened, or when I got hired. And then we opened shortly after that. And he was there a lot at the beginning. And I know him very well.
That's wild. Yeah. Another full circle. Yeah. Gosh, you all were just in this hotbed of greatness without realizing what was building, what was growing. What an exciting time.
It was a special time because everybody was coming to us, right? Now everybody's kind of spread out, right? Like, they're spread out all over the world, all over the country. At that point, everybody was coming to the same tunnel. So we were getting to learn from everybody, meet everybody, you know what I mean? And so I think, we were very, very fortunate to be in that situation at the time with like the right time, right place.
The unfortunate part with doing a roughly 1 hour podcast is we are zooming through great periods of time, but to keep our audience clued in here, because I want to get into this next period, is you end up joining a 4-way team, Synchronicity, that would go on to win the World Championships as an all 4-way female team in Spain. The story is essentially you all were down going to the 10th round, and it's well documented, and it was very exciting that you all pulled out the win in the 10th round. And that really got you some added attention. And that success led an invitation to join Arizona Airspeed.
Yes. Yes. Can
you share that period of time or that moment when the invitation came and what that was all about?
I had been, I did Tunnel Rage. And then right after Tunnel Rage, I got a call from Lilac. Her last name was Hayes at the time, but she called me and asked me if I wanted to join this women's team. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. They're like, we're having a World Cup here in Arizona or in the US, and there's no women's team that's going to represent, and it's a new event. I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. It's interesting. I'm like, when is it? And I thought she was going to say like next year sometime. And she's like, next month. I'm like, next month? Oh my God. I'm like, are we even going to be ready? And she's like, we can do a few training jumps. I think we can get, we can do some jumps there. We can do a few weekends. But she goes, I think, with our team, we can do good, because they had done a test event before. So she kind of knew the averages. So I was like, okay, I'm in. So we went and we did a couple training weekends, and we trained in Arizona as well. I think probably did 30 jumps or so, or 40 jumps. And then we did the competition, the World Cup, and we won. And so that was really exciting. And so then we got asked to represent the US at the World Meet in Spain, like 6 months later. At the time, it was very, very close. And so we decided to do it. And this time we trained more than I ever had done, and more jumps than I'd ever done in my life. Because before that, I'd done 100 jumps maximum a year. And this time we did 300 in 6 months. And we got a coach, we got Joey Jones, and we were doing lots of tunnel time. So we put a lot of effort, like passion, and, and we were like, we had won the World Cup. So we, had a lot of hope that we can win the world meet. And during this time, Arizona Airspeed was holding a lot of tunnel camps at the tunnel. So that's where I got to know them, and they got to know me. So they would see me fly, not necessarily with the team all the time, but like, just fly with my students and coach, and just, I got to know them, and they all got to know me. And then they were, also training for the World Meet as well. We go to the World Meet, and it was a very exciting competition, a big roller coaster ride of like 10 rounds, because we were good, then we were down, and then we were slowly crawling our way back up. And we ended up winning on that last round, which was, like we did the best jump we'd ever done. And I remember landing and like, my cheeks hurt because from smiling, I couldn't stop smiling. I smile a lot, so that, I got good muscles there, but I just felt really good about our performance. Like, I didn't know if we'd won or lost, but I just felt good. I was just like proud of us. I remember some of the airspeed guys, before we took off, everybody's giving you high fives, and they're like, like, a lot of times you're feeling nervous, right? Because you want to perform well, kind of like the round one, because like, if you could take that and bottle it up, you could, like, sell it for a lot of money, because it's just like you're nervous, but you're also super excited, right? Your body is getting you ready for this big jump, the jump of your life, and a lot of it's on the line, like you can win or lose, right? So I come down, and I know I felt really good, and we were down by 3 points, I think. Yeah, no, we were down by 1 point, and then we won by 3. So that was just like the icing on the cake, And so after that, I didn't realize that during that airspeed, they hadn't mentioned it to me that they were actually considering me for a slot on their team, because they had somebody leaving and they were looking for another teammate. And so the question is always like, like they could fly, they could see me fly in the tunnel. She could fly well, but how is she going to be under pressure, right? Like if it came down to, down 1 point or up 1 point, are you going to be able to perform? And so they got their answer there at the World Meet, right? So then the invitation came afterwards. Yeah. So then
and I just want to interject. One aspect of that showed your toughness is your team had no alternate, and you'd sprained your ankle early in the competition.
Yeah.
Which didn't exactly help with confidence.
Yeah.
And yet, you all really put it on the line.
That's right. I forgot about that. That's right. Yeah, I did. On one of the jumps, I can't remember, but early on, like the first half of the meet, I landed, and the ground was a little bit uneven, and I landed really hard, and it really hurt. And I didn't fall, but I had twisted my ankle, and I called my teammates over, and I was like, yikes, it hurts really bad. So they took me over to the medic, and the medic was like, well, what are you going to do? You can't jump anymore. And I was like, what? No way. Like, we don't even, I have to jump. And fortunately that day we didn't need to jump, but anymore that day. But, my teammate, she was a physical therapist. So she kind of checked it out, and she bent it one way or the other. She's like, okay, you can move it this way, but not this way. And we iced it all night, took ibuprofen, elevated it, just trying to do everything we could. And then, she taped it up really well the next day, and then kept on going. And so
sounds like a movie, Eliana. That sounds like a movie.
Yeah, I was like so grateful it wasn't broken. But yeah, it was, for a moment, I thought it could, it was on the edge, right? It really hurt at the time.
You join airspeed shortly after. Is there pressure on you? Because there's pressure enough being on airspeed because of the standard, but everyone is making the huge issue that Eliana is the only woman who has ever joined Arizona Airspeed, which in itself is not helping with the. It's like, yeah, amazing, awesome. It is completely inspiring because it's been a man's team, if you will, but that's added pressure because there's parity in the air, but everyone's making a deal of this, and you're just doing your thing. Mm-hmm. So did that weigh on you at all?
I wanted to perform well, but I think, whether it was being the first woman or just being on any team, I feel like it's always the case. You're whether you're on a team with all women or, it's like you just want to do your best, Yeah, that year, we had a little bit of, it was a lot of ups and downs because we had a lot of injuries on the team that year. We had Gary Beyer on a snowboarding accident, separated his shoulder. Then we had someone quit. And then right before the nationals, 1 month before, I did break my ankle this time. I was sliding in and I rolled it, and it was fractured that time, and I couldn't go to my first nationals with airspeed. I was pretty bummed about that. I was like, I can't believe this. It was like my first year on the team, in a professional team, and I'm not going to the nationals. But they were all very supportive. Nobody was angry or anything like that, and I wasn't even going to go to the nationals because I wasn't competing, and they're like, no, you have to come with us. So they brought me out with them. And so I was able to just, cheer them on from the sidelines for that one. But, took 3 months off and then got right back on it.
And that was the beginning of history in terms of, I need to look into my notes. Do you recall how many nationals and worlds that you won with airspeed?
With airspeed, I won 2 world championships, one in 4-way open and one in 8-way open. And then I won 2 World Cups. In 2005, we won, in the same World Cup, we won the 4-way and the 8-way at the same time. And then in 4-way open and 8-way open. And then as far as national championships, I think it's all of them except for like my one with Rage, which is like 20 or 21. Actually, I don't even know if I put my Rage one in that CV, my intermediate one. But yeah, all the like all the 4-way, 8-ways, 16-ways, and 10-ways, which were all the 21 national championships over those years.
This podcast is sponsored by Beyond Marketing, the digital marketing agency for the skydiving industry. Now, I'm not a fan of lots of ads during a podcast. I mean, who likes ads? So I'll stop talking about how marvelously wonderful Beyond Marketing is. But if you're curious about what the amazing people of Beyond Marketing do to help drop zones and manufacturers thrive, then you should check out their website at dropzone.marketing. That's dropzone.marketing. If you had to take the TED stage, and you are sharing one of the moments in your incredible career with Airspeed, what's a moment that brings you the most pride?
Wow. I mean, what's the moment? Man, because I was on Airspeed 9 years, right? It wasn't just 1 year or 2 and lots of competitions. I mean, I think overall, obviously grew in skydiving, in my skills, in my 4-way and 8-way skills. But I think what I like the most about being on Airspeed is that I grew it in other ways as well, like, leadership skills, even public speaking skills. Like when I first got on the team, I was really terrified of public speaking for some reason. And I would say it's still not my comfort zone. Some people are very natural public speakers like Craig and Kirk. But for me, it's always been I've always been shyer on that end. And when I first got on the team, they were wanting me to give some seminars, and I was like, I just got on the team. And I felt like they could do such a much better job than I would. And I felt very insecure about doing it, but they really encouraged me and helped me and were there, to help me out. And so that helped me grow a lot. And we would also rotate the leadership, right? The captain, where we could, like, every week we'd have a different captain. And so it was just strange, like getting in there, like the first couple, weeks and then I was like the captain of I was on the team, and my first 4-way team was with Kirk Werner. So I was like leading him, but again, they would, at the end of the week, we talk about what went well and what needed to improve on. And so that gave me a lot of confidence and helped me a lot. And so I grew in so many more ways than I ever imagined I would have been on a skydiving team. Skills that you can take into other things, like being part of, just being the teamwork side of things.
I'd like to preempt an invitation to you for us to have another conversation on this podcast, if that'd be okay, next year. I want to dig deeper into your experiences with Airspeed. Again, your career is so vast, and there's so much I'm curious about. But I would be remiss if I didn't bring up, with the time that we have left, is this new initiative going on that I don't know much about, which is the Hera Rising initiative. And there's talk about you being one of 3 possible women going to the stratosphere. Can you tell me and our audience about this?
Yeah, so it's the Hera Rising mission. And I got a call in November of 2021 from Amy Shimalecki and Sarah Curtis. They had been called by somebody from the Hera Rising team. They wanted to break the record of, Alan Eustis's record of the highest altitude jump. But this time they wanted to do it with a woman. And initially they were looking for just a Latina woman, so they were like, we know the one. So they called me, and I was driving somewhere, and I was talking to them, and I hear they say, would you be interested in this? I mean, they just tell me about it, and I was like, my heart, dropped. I was like, immediately it was like, oh my God, this is scary. It sounds scary. But then I was like, I'm curious. Tell me more. And so they started telling me about the team and the people that had approached them, and that they wanted to break the record. You know, the person who started the idea, his name is Ronald Chang Diaz, and he's him and his wife, Ana Cristina Munoz, or now ex-wife, but that was in 2018. His brother is an astronaut. His brother's Franklin Chang Diaz, and he's in the Hall of Fame for astronauts. He's been in space 7 times. And so Franklin is an older brother to Ronald. And so when Ronald was 16, his father passed away, and Franklin was already in the U.S. at NASA. And so his mom sent him to his brother, and he went to high school there in the U.S. And he started learning a lot about space, and he became a big space enthusiast. Like he loves space and he loves STEM, and he became an engineer. And so he was doing these balloon experiments in Costa Rica. And from there, he also did. He also sent up the first satellite from Central America. And so after he got done with these project that he was doing, because he was doing a lot of stuff around STEM and encouraging young people to get into STEM, he was looking for the next project. And that's when him and his wife at the time were like, you know, instead of doing something just for Costa Rica, let's do something like more global and, you know, to change, you know, the world. And so she was more of an inspiration around not just breaking a record, but also doing it with a woman. And so, and he has a lot of passion for STEM, and he wanted to create opportunities for young people, especially, you know, young girls and women, to get into the fields of STEM, because he felt like it changed their lives so much when their brother became an astronaut. And so it wasn't just their lives, but also felt like it changed the country's lives, because it was like the first time a Costa Rican went to space, you know. So the project was born then COVID happened, and initially they had a couple Costa Rican women that were doing it, that were like a primary and a backup, but one of them decided to like go back to graduate school, and so things changed there for her. And so that's when they reached out to Amy and Sarah. And that's when Sarah and Amy reached out to me. But there was a group of women that they were looking at, a group of skydivers. And so they narrowed it down to 3 women. So it's myself, it's Swati Varshni, and Diana Valerin. And Diana's from Costa Rica. She was one of the original ones. She was like the backup to one of the other Costa Rican women. And Swati is, her parents are from India. So she's like a woman of color, right? So both of them are engineers. They haven't decided who it's going to be yet until they get more funding and they do more testing. All 3 of us went to try on spacesuits, which is kind of insane, in Houston. And they wanted to see how we would do in the spacesuits, if we were claustrophobic, and if we even wanted to do it after trying on these spacesuits, because, you know, it's not just trying on the spacesuits, but it's pressurized spacesuit. The system they're going to use very, very similar to Alan Eustace system. It's made by Paragon Space Development Corporation. They're going to use the same company. Yeah, so it's being pulled up in a balloon, not in a gondola, right? So you're just being pulled up in your spacesuit, which is like your little spacecraft. So this is
just as Alan did.
Just as Alan did, yeah. So so we tried on these spacesuits, and their idea was they were gonna choose 2 women, a primary and a backup. But when we were there, we had such good camaraderie, like we were so supportive of each other. They were like, "We want all 3 of you. You know, we want this to be more about women lifting each other up." You know, so I thought that was really, really amazing. So it's just really amazing to be part of this team. I don't know if I'm going to be the one. I could be. And it's kind of a crazy thought, thinking about jumping from the stratosphere. But what's really exciting is just that it's just bigger than one jump. It's bigger than one record. It's bigger than one person. And it's, you know, it's about, inspiring, especially young women and girls to dream as, you know, dream as much, you know, and like, it doesn't matter how big it is, you know, to go for their dreams. And also they're creating a whole team of educators around the STEM and STEAM, and they're going to create a curriculum which is going to also be for kids, like underprivileged kids that maybe don't have internet to see the jump, you know, or see everything. So they're really trying to reach out to not just people in South America, but like the world, and create this curriculum that's going to be aligned with the mission which is really interesting.
So what is the most immediate next step that has to happen as you're going through this journey?
Right now, it's funding. We have Paragon on board to create this life support system. Now, Paragon also has a spacesuit. They're building the spacesuit. They're actually got a big funding. NASA and Paragon got big funding for creating new technology around the spacesuit. Because one of the things that happened before was the technology that they had was old technology, like from the 60s, and so some of the women have been astronauts have been qualified to go to the moon and everything, to walk on the moon, but they haven't been able to because there hasn't been a suit that could fit them. There's now a lot of research and development going into making a new suit. And so the suit that they would create for this project could potentially be the suit that women astronauts are going to be using in the future. So,
cool.
Yeah, all the technology and learning.
Have you had any conversation with Alan Eustace about this?
Yes. When I was thinking about doing this and I was asking myself, should I do this? Is this? And I thought maybe I should ask somebody who's done this before and see what they think. And Alan's perfect because he worked with Paragon. And so ask him what he thought and just find out, what am I getting myself into? So I had a conversation. I had Dan BC introduce me to him, and we had a Zoom call. He says he doesn't care if other people break his record. He just wants it to be done safely. So he'll talk to anybody that was willing to, that's interested. And I was asking him just different questions, and he was giving me different ideas and responses. He's like, make sure you ask him this, make sure you ask him that. And when I told him that they're going to be using the Hair Rising project's going to be using Paragon, he was like, oh, okay, I'm not worried at all. He goes, I would do it with them again if I were to do it. So that made me feel a lot better.
It seems like you're connected to a community that has no shortage of knowledge on it, because I know Art Thompson was at the Museum and Hall of Fame event, who's very much part of Red Bull Stratus. And, I'm sure he and Alan have probably traded a lot of notes on their experiences with these record-breaking jumps.
Yes. And I mean, he's got the intellectual property, the intellectual data, and he's him and Paragon both have it, and he's willing to share it all, so that's a really good starting place, for something like this. It makes me feel better, for sure.
Incredible. Eliana, how much of your accomplishments do you think are attributed to having this incredibly positive attitude and just being open and hard work ethic?
I mean, it definitely helps, right? Especially in team environments, to be in a good mood when you come to work. But I think it also helps to be doing something you love, right? It's hard to be, I think it'd be harder to be in a good mood if you're doing something you don't like, right? One of the things I feel like the gifts that skydiving has given to me, it's it changed my perspective on work, because I used to think that everybody around me and my family growing up, everybody was going to work to make a living, not necessarily because they loved what they did, right? Everybody was going to work so that on their time off, they can do what they wanted, right? To buy the things they wanted, to do the things they wanted. But, everybody was working really hard, but they weren't loving what they did. And I just thought that's what you were supposed to do. You go to college, find a job so that later, then you can make some money and do what you want. And so with skydiving, I realized that, wow, you can actually love what you work in and you get paid for it. And so it changed my perspective. And after that, now I don't want to settle for anything differently. I don't want to just go out and get a different job. I want to be in things that I love. And so when you're doing things that you love, you're excited to come to work. You're happy, right? You're in a good mood, and you want to learn. You want to put in the work. You don't mind putting in the work. You don't mind putting in the time. So it makes it easier to do that, right? Because it doesn't feel like work.
That is an awesome spot to end. We haven't talked about more specifics about airspeed. We haven't talked about your years in Dubai. We haven't talked about you becoming a member of the Skydiving Hall of Fame. And I hate that. I want to know what you're reading. I want to know what podcasts you listen to. There's so much more that I'd love to learn, but I think this is a great stopping point. Maybe we can do episode 2 with Eliana in the near future. I don't want to be selfish, but thank you, Eliana, for your time. Most of all, and I know you hear this a lot, and I want to say this with sincerity and remove any cliche. Thank you for who you are.
Thank you.
You are this positive light in our sport and a great example. And I often hear your name mentioned with women, whether it be with Highlight or first woman on airspeed, first and only woman on airspeed. But I just view you as incredible human being, ambassador for not just women, ambassador for the sport. I feel grateful for how you've treated me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when you're a young jumper, or in my case, a young jumper and a drop zone manager, you put folks on a pedestal, and you have always treated me not as less than or a baby jumper. There's no ego to you. Your resume doesn't lead as you walk through the door. Eliana leads, and if someone is willing to find out more about you, then they'll find out, oh, damn, Eliana's badass. So thank you for who you are and for being such a great ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you for all those kind words. And thank you for who you are. We've always, loved, seeing you anytime we meet you from the very first time, anytime we meet you anywhere in the world. We think Craig and I have always talked about what an amazing person you are. So we appreciate you. And it's been a pleasure to know you and to get to do this podcast with you.
Thank you, Eliana. Super time.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Please do follow us on your podcast app so you always have the latest episode, which is released every Monday. If you want to contact the team, our email address is podcast@beyondmarketing.xyz. This episode was edited and engineered by Garnet Znydrick of the YouTube channel Blue Skies Fun Days. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for our next episode.